Yeah, make your point. So, great to see everybody. My name is Joe Nay, and I'm talking about storytelling at a cyber conference, which usually isn't the most exciting thing, but I'm hoping that I can explain why I think that it's really important and why I find a lot of excitement in it. So a little bit about me. I've been in cybersecurity for 8 years. I've been on both the blue team and red team side of things. So I was a penetration tester for years. A lot of the examples that I'm going to have today are from penetration testing. And also I'm now a solutions architect at Horizon 3. So moving from the manual testing into my most hated enemy as a manual tester, which is the automated penetration testing. So right now I'm at Horizon 3 AI, and I also have a podcast. That's not anything cyber related. It's actually on fairy tales. So it's called Once Upon a Podcast. So the reason that I wanted to speak on storytelling, and the reason that it's like one of my biggest passions, is very early when I was doing penetration testing. It was one of the very first pen tests that I'd done, and I was doing a network, and it was the very first time I got domain admin, and I was really excited about it. We got all these crazy things that we were finding all these improvements for the company to make. And I go, because you got to debrief, right, before you build the report, because report building takes a while. And so I had I had the debrief, and I was chatting with the folks, and I went, here are your problems, and you should really fix them, and this is why. And I explained it to the best that I could at the time, but they didn't do a dang thing, and I was confused. I was like, why aren't they listening to me? And so I learned that we technical folks, we're brilliant at a whole lot of things, but sometimes communication is that one shortfall that some of us have. And so it's something that I recognize that through the power of narrative specifically, and we'll talk about why narrative and storytelling, but that's the way that we need to turn things from laundry lists of issues into a compelling story for someone to actually make a change, right? And so I found that as a pen tester, it's not my job I could hack my way to the moon and back, but that's not going to be worth anything if I can't explain what those issues are. So it's our job to captivate attention. It's nobody's job to listen to any of us. Well, maybe if you're like the big boss man, if there's any CISOs here, it's my job to listen to you, and everyone's job to listen to you. But for most of us, it's not anyone's job to captivate it or to have anyone listen to us. It's our job to captivate their attention. And so jumping in for what is storytelling and what is narrative, I looked it up in a dictionary, and it said an account of imaginary or real people and events for entertainment. And I think that's like the worst definition that you could possibly think of for it, just because it's a little bit boring, and I don't think it's great on its own. But I like having the definition of it. It's when facts meet context. And so it's the art of science and convincing. And really, it's information exchange that matters. It's how we evolved as humans to be able to communicate and to be able to understand information. So, an example, you may look at this, and I'm curious what it means to you. And the answer is probably not much at all, because it's facts with no context. There's some industries and some things down there, but let's change one thing, and now we'll put you into the story. You are now the CISO in the public health industry. You're the CISO of a big hospital or whatever it may be. And now you're looking where you're affected here, and all of a sudden it becomes a story because the facts are meeting context. And so I want you to think of something that you've learned in the last couple of days while we've been here. Just the most exciting fact that you've learned. And I want you to remember where you learned it. And it's probably not something like, in a graph, and it's interesting, this statistic. It's most likely something that was told in the form of a story. And so the reason for that is our brains are really wired for storytelling. And there's a couple of reasons why, because there's been theories on it, and it's something that we really don't know, but it's something that we've done a lot of research on. One is it's a survival skill. Ultimately, back in the early days when we had to hunt for our food, all the way to today, we've had to collaborate as humans. The hunter that was able to explain where to find the deer and explain how to collaborate together was the one that survived. The same thing with a memory booster. I know that Admiral Akbar's home planet is Mancala, and I know that my anniversary is sometime next year. So the memory booster side of it, so far it's great. I'm happy. I'm not sure about my wife, but we're doing our best. But yeah, so narratives stick better than raw facts, and that's how we've developed, again, maybe back to that survival skill. And then lastly is it's a simulation engine. You can think oh, you're talking to me, and we've all been in that situation before, either after a tense situation or even, I wish that was me, where you're looking at yourself in the mirror and going through that. It lets us have this simulation of how to survive. What would we do in that situation? It helps us practice for things like presenting. But there was one issue that I ran into, and that is that I felt like storytelling, we a lot of times see it as an art, right? It's not exactly a science in our minds. We see it kind of as a right brain and left brain thing. But I kind of compare it to code and writing any sort of system. I've seen some beautiful GitHub pages. Even the README is sometimes people are able to architect those looking really, really good. And so the idea is, okay, if we can take code, which is purely a science, and understand that as an art, there's got to be some way that we can take the art of storytelling and turn that into a science. We can find those rules. We can find what we can do to be able to make our stories better and be able to make our point even better. So I thought, how funny would it be? Because it's no fun to tell a good story sometimes, especially if we're learning about storytelling. So I wanted to tell a couple of terrible stories. And we're going to be real quick here. These are your network pen test results. If you push this button, a door will probably open. And lastly, that is a story of how Jack was almost eaten by the giant. That's from one of my favorite parody books on fairy tales. But all those sucked, right? Those were not very good stories, but it's fun to understand. When we see something that's bad, we can understand why it's good. And something that I intentionally did was I gave the beginning of one, the middle of another, and then the end of the last one. And so there's something called the tell them theory when it comes to storytelling. And if you take anything from today, make sure that it's this, because I think it's something that we get wrong so often, is we need to make sure that we start by introducing our topic. We're going to tell, and there's a lot of tell them up there, but we're going to tell the people that we're talking to what we're going to say. We need to present it at first. We've all been in that situation where we've been having a conversation in our own head, and then we walk up to somebody and we jump in mid-conversation and they go, okay, I don't get it, slow down, whatever it may be. Happens all the time. Second piece is tell them what you promised you would tell them. And then lastly is tell them what you told them again, recap, but you want to give the perspective and that idea that they want to take away, that you want them to take away from that. But keep in mind the context matters. So you don't need to always follow the structure. It's not a perfect thing. It is a science, but there is a little bit of an art to it too. You need to understand your audience's expectations. You're going to be talking differently to a non-technical executive versus the other sysadmin or another technical resource that you're working with. And also you want to read the room and understand the time that you're given. What you have to say is important. And if you don't think it's important, then no one else will. And so you need to sell yourself on that. That way, when you are able to tell that story, you understand the impact. If you need more time, you're going to say, hey, this is the short spiel, this is the synopsis, and we're going to get into that in a minute. But this is the synopsis, I need to tell you more later. Or if you have time, take the time. Make sure that you're taking the time that you need to make your point get across. So that takes us to, oftentimes, we'll get into the idea of a synopsis versus a plot summary. And if you've ever been on IMDb and you've read and wanted to spoil the movie that you're about to watch, a plot summary is going to take you through every step of the story. Meanwhile, a synopsis, say for example, Lord of the Rings, I have a couple of examples of Lord of the Rings here, but one example that we'll get into in a minute is Frodo gets a ring and there's this evil being and he goes on a quest to destroy all evil. And I have another example of that in a minute. But one thing is with Everything Everywhere All at Once is a fantastic movie. If you haven't seen it, go watch it today or watch it on your flight home if you're flying in. It's a fantastic movie. But I had the hardest time getting into it. Everyone recommended it to me, and I watched it like 3 or 4 times, and I only got through the first 10 minutes. And the reason was, and we've all had this happen where we're recommended a book or a movie and we can't get into it because we don't know what it's about. We need to have the expectation a little bit of the story that we're going to be told. And so as soon as my friend who kept on recommending it to me, I said, okay, you don't need to spoil it for me, but give me a synopsis. And he said, okay, well, it's this cool multiversal story, but it's really about a family relationship, a mom with her daughter, and it's funny and it's action-packed and it's a really good time. And that's all you need to know as a preface to watch that movie, and it's going to be one of the best movies that you'll be able to watch. So again, plot summary versus a synopsis. We don't need to give a step-by-step of what we need to say. Oftentimes, we can give people enough to want more at a later time. And so I have an example of this. I'm just curious by the number of hands. This video has like 1.5 million views on YouTube, and I'm pretty sure at least 500 of them are me personally. So I'm feeding the algorithm, but how many have seen this video? Okay, cool. The rest of you are in for a treat. We're only going to go through the first 30 seconds, but it's a great example of a plot summary versus a synopsis, if I can figure out how I can get this working.
I think I speak for everyone here when I say it is very exciting to be in a room with you, Mr. Tolkien. Okay. We loved publishing The Hobbit. Can you tell us a bit about this next book? It's about a magic ring. Yeah. Given to an heir. Yeah. Who must destroy all evil. Yeah. On a magic quest. What happens next? They walk. Somebody's following them. Walk. Hide. Walk. Steal some mushrooms. Get on the boat. Walk. Elves for the first time. Wow. Walk. Nighttime. Walk. Attacked by Tweed.
Anyway, go watch the full version. It takes you through the entire Fellowship of the Ring. And also it has some Harry Potter references there as well. If you didn't catch those, there's Ron and Harry. But the whole point is you saw how excited the entire room was when he was building up that synopsis. And when you put it to music, it's still pretty exciting. I like the walk thing. It gets stuck in my head constantly, and I apologize if it is for you. But the whole point is we can figure out how to give that short story and keep that excitement going that allows us to give the full story there. So now, second time going through some terrible stories. And I'll give the beginning, middle, and end. Here are your pen test results. We found, legacy name resolution protocols. That's default, and it's a problem. We found SMB signing that was disabled and not required. That's also a problem. And also ESC1 misconfigurations with the Active Directory certificate services. That could lead to domain compromise, and we were able to get domain compromise there. So that's a problem. You should fix it. Another story is you should push the button, and here's a button for you. If you push it, it'll probably open. What's on the other side of the door? I don't know. Maybe push it to find out. And then finally, because we're right before lunch, here's a sandwich. And so this is a sandwich that looks very much like a sandwich that I had yesterday. And I know that it's a burger, but I titled it sandwich. I'm sorry. But yeah, it was a great sandwich. And I think that we should all eat sandwiches around lunchtime today. Well, depending on what they have. Probably not a sandwich, but those aren't bad, but we can do better. So a couple more things is one thing that is really, really awesome. It puts people into the story is making sure that you add a protagonist. If you're able to add a protagonist into the story, with what I do with my company, we do autonomous pen testing, and we have a phishing pen test that's going to integrate with any phishing simulation tool that a company has. And so the benefit is as soon as you click on that link, or someone who's phished clicks on that link, it'll be able to run a pen test with that user. A lot of times it's very hard to understand. So the way that I tell that story is if you're, phishing me and I click on the link and I walk myself through it, then they're able to see, Mary in accounting and John in this department, John in sales, and they're able to see exactly kind of the story that would be able to be built based off of that. Because a story without a character is just a report. And it matters as soon as you have a person involved. And so it really creates that impact that you need. Again, we want to be able to tell better stories so that we can make change and we can inspire change, just like I couldn't when I was giving that pen test debrief. So another example is tell me a little, or just think about what you feel when looking at this screen. Again, probably not a whole lot. If there's any background where maybe this has some feeling, I don't envy you. But now, if we go ahead and see this, now we're putting a person into it. It doesn't matter that it's an Apple computer and it's a Windows lockout screen. I have no clue how that happened. But all of a sudden, you're looking at the girl and you're starting to feel like, okay, this matters. You're starting to get into that emotional piece there. And so by giving a protagonist, we're able to help it. Now, when it comes to pacing, the most important thing I could say is pacing is not speaking slowly the whole time. I know a couple of people that think that if you speak slow, and that's the whole idea of pacing, is sometimes you need to speed up. Because again, what you have to say is important. So speed up when you want to, get to the next point and you want to create excitement, but then you need to slow down too. And it sometimes even stop. I was going to challenge myself to see how quiet I could be and how long I could let that silence last. Because yeah, silence can be so loud. But yes, pacing is so important. But again, going through ebbs and flows, you want to be able to create excitement as you're going through that story to continue to captivate attention. And the last thing I have here is to be specific and concrete. I wanted to put another video in here, but I'll just tell you about it because I think telling about it is actually even more exciting. There is an interview that Bill Burr did, and he's talking about the NFL, and he talks about kicking the commissioner of the NFL kicking a baby across his office and how Bill Burr would still watch the NFL on Sundays. And that sounds like a terrible thing, and it makes him sound like a terrible person. But because he's so specific and concrete with that story, it ends up being so freaking funny, and you're able to imagine it. And instead of thinking that he's a terrible human being, everyone's laughing. So yeah, go look up Bill Burr punt on YouTube, and it'll be the first one. But essentially, being specific and concrete and giving those examples, it puts someone into the story. It makes it, again, not just a report. And you could look at this picture with Frodo and think, that's just a ring. But if you understand the context and you understand how specific it is, you understand that it's the one ring, it means so much more. So Storytime Part 3, we're going back to the button. Here's a button, and it is my favorite button. And if you push this button, and you could do so in probably about a half an hour, you know what would be on the other side? It'd be the sandwich. And so we'd be able to have lunch. Next story I want to tell is, again, network pen test results I'll pretend I'm presenting these. These are your network pen test results. All of these issues, most of them are going to be default configuration, specifically the legacy name resolution protocols and the SMB signing disabled. These are default, and we need to make sure that these are fixed in the environment. Because without these, it's going to lead to not just domain compromise, and we were able to achieve that, but it's going to cost the company potentially millions of dollars. It's going to lead to operational downtime. It's going to lead to brand reputation damage. It's going to lead to ransomware exposure. All of these things are concrete results of what could happen because we're sitting like an open duck. So my question to you is this acceptable business risk, or should we adjust priorities to resolve this? That drives the point so much better to be able to drive that change and give a concrete invitation, a concrete, this is what we need. Are you willing to accept this risk? By doing that, we're able to drive that home so much stronger. And then lastly, I have the story of you, and it's everyone in IT, it's everyone in cybersecurity, it's everyone who's trying to get into that world. We really are. I started this by saying, we brilliant folks, maybe we aren't so good at communication, but the fact is forget that last half of it. We are brilliant. And all of us have our own unique view. And just like we've seen in the keynote, even from Tuesday, we find those things that we're interested in and we dive down those rabbit holes. We're able to understand things so well, get so excited. And so what we have to say is important. And if you don't think what you have to say is important, no one else will. So make sure that you know that, because we really are brilliant. And so we got to be confident. We got to be those learn-it-alls. And I wanted to make sure to share this today because we went through a couple of things: the tell them theory, plot summary versus synopsis, how to really craft these narratives. And we're never going to be perfect at them, right? I mean, we could try our best, but the coolest thing is if we can just take a little bit of each of these, we're going to be the best storytellers that we can be. We're going to be able to be the best compelling talkers that we can be. And so that's using all these and being the best versions of ourselves is how we're going to be able to make our point and to be able to make it stick. So I appreciate it. I have QR codes to Rickroll and then also my podcast and LinkedIn. So feel free to get in touch with me and I'd be happy to chat afterward. So thank you, everybody.